It keeps saying it's on preview mode. Go live. Okay, there we go. Hopefully, let's see this working. How about now? Is it working now? Oh, crazy. All right, so here's the weird thing that I just discovered. I don't know if people can you guys can see us, right? All right, so yeah, the issue that I saw is that everything was connecting really well with OBS. It's just that there was one tiny button I had to hit on YouTube saying go live. So I had to like do another pass, and I didn't really see that. So, that was my bad. I think we're good to go. Looks like everyone is saying they can see us. So, yeah, we can begin. And thanks so much for waiting on us, guys. And thanks for dealing with our BS because we didn't see that coming up, and YouTube streaming is weird like that. But I think today we're just gonna have a really fun, casual conversation. I have my friend Alan here. Alan is really cool. You guys can hear him, right? Wait, hold on. Sorry, I didn't say something again,
Hear
Alan.
me?
Say something. Yeah, because I
One,
had to
two,
turn
hello.
because I had to turn on desktop audio too. So I guess we're good to go. And let me know if you guys can or cannot hear Alan. All right, so you guys, I guess some of you guys know me. I'm Taniko. This is me. This is me and my I guess my mascot. People think it's a personification of me, but it's not. I've worked on mostly feature animation. These are some of the films I worked on. Some of them will probably never come out. We'll see. These are some of the other animated projects I worked on. Being storyboarding for TV or character design or some animation work. And I'm going to let Alan introduce himself briefly too, because I don't have slides for that, but maybe Alan can say stuff.
Oh yeah, sure. I'll say stuff. Hi, I'm Alan. I've been in the industry for just a little over half a decade, and probably most of it was in TV animation production. I started out as a colorist, so basically I'd get color sheets and fill in with a tool bucket, just the first leg in the industry. Then I climbed up to be a designer, eventually a lead environment designer for shows like Last Kids on Earth. I was recently on Star Trek Lower Decks for season 1. I was more or less the only CG person there, so I helped like animate and do shaders for the intro. And then most recently, I was with Jeremy, who worked on the Area 21 music video. And now I'm doing a creative adventure in video games where I work now as a cinematic artist for Blackbird Interactive for an upcoming IP. It's pretty cool.
Awesome. Me and Alan, we knew each other actually during our high school days. We actually met online through like concept art forums and like Newgrounds and stuff like that. And we just kept connected, but we were just doing stuff together. And maybe I'll make the presentation slides bigger because there's not really a lot of text. There's not a lot of images on it, but I guess I can do that so you guys can see what is being said. So
Your face is not important. Let them see
yeah,
the
our face
slides.
isn't important. They're just like screw you. Let's see the slides. This talk, I've always wanted to do it, and I've always been fascinated with like working on personal projects or making a thing for yourself. And there's a lot of things I want to talk about for it because I've experienced it for a very long time. Like even during my school days, I would work on my own stuff. Even during my full-time job, I would also work on my own stuff. And more people know me based on projects I did on the side. They don't really know me as the guy who worked on How to Train Your Dragon or Keepo or whatnot, but they know me for things like drawing a peen-shaped penguin or a dancing dog, and I'm proud of that. And then it's like years of me just like playing around with this stuff, experimenting and things I learned. And also I'm taking a break from my full-time job so I can actually get a better understanding of what it's like to be more independent or more on my own. So yeah, that's that's kind of why I wanted to make something like this. Oh, whoops! I actually made it smaller because I'm in the wrong window. It's so seamless, and yeah, I do want to talk about like some strategies, what it's like juggling between your own life, personal projects. If you have a full-time job, is there a way to get through that? And yeah, it is possible. And there's like a lot of like things that me and Alan, we want to talk about, and we're just gonna bounce back and forth for each of these topics. So the first topic, of course, is just to start, just to do it. If you have something that you want to make, just go for it. Like, if you have like a little comic that you want to make, just start making something out of it. Because there's a lot of people that I know who say, "Oh, I can't start on something. I can't do this. I'm not skilled enough yet. I'm not ready for that yet. I'm not advanced for that, so I'm not going to do it." But then if you just like start somewhere, at least that builds up experience and you can learn from that, and eventually that can be the start of you mastering a skill or a practice that you usually do. Alan, you have anything to say about this?
I think you're hitting a lot of stuff on it. Basically, we as artists tend to have our own anxieties. So when we think about like, oh, I have this grand project I want to start on, but it's like, oh, I need to study how to, like, what anatomy is, or perspective, or composition, and then the more you study those, it's like that project gets being pushed back and back. But as most things, it needs to mature over time. So it's important just to at least get some groundwork done with that project. So like you said, just do it. So at least it's existing in the real world rather than in your head. Because once in a while, you can have all these fantastical images in your head, but as soon as you put, pen or pencil to paper, it's like, oh, you know what? It's kind of missing a few things, and you can start maturing it as time goes on. And I'm sure you and I have had projects that we've been working on the back of our heads for like decades, like even maybe since high school, you've just like, there's little things that you've noodled on, and it's just grown to full worlds, and it does take time. So the sooner you start, and the more mature those ideas become, and it's great after that.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys, maybe many of you guys already know, but like I said, I've actually started animating with Flash cartoons back in the Newgrounds days since like my high school days, because you can get a copy of Flash and make a short film from then. So I do have like a compilation of like stuff that I made back in high school. Let me mute the volume because it's stupid Skull Monkeys soundtrack. But this is stuff that I did back when I was like 15, 16, and just making like stuff. Like I didn't really know the rules.
Increase the screen size of it.
Oh.
The screen.
I mean, it's so pixelated because it was ripped from like.
Let's see it.
Look, it's ripped from like a 550 default Flash size from like the Flash 8 days. But yeah, it's about a penguin that goes through trials. But I mean, it's a compilation of all this other stuff that I worked on in the past. So look at this. It's a music video. So the way I learned this stuff is from like tutorial videos and animations from Newgrounds, and a lot of these people didn't really have a full grasp of what animation was or what it's like to work in the industry. People just learned it on the side and they helped each other. Like, I mean, I'll get to that soon, but I think, well, I'll wrap back at that, but I think we can move on to other things that we do want to talk about. And so, another good tip that I have is just to start with small projects. Nothing too fancy, nothing too big. It can just be a single shot or something really casual, because a lot of people who want to start their own projects, they have a grand idea, or they have really high ambitions to like make an epic 10-minute, 30-minute short. And I've fallen into that trap many times from my high school days until now. I've actually like had issues completing them, and then I would get overwhelmed. But you could just like make a project where it's just like a clip of a person running in a loop, or just something that's like mundane. It doesn't have to make sense. It's just that. Nothing too big, nothing too fancy, nothing too deep. And I think Alan has a lot to say about this because he makes a lot of these Blender shorts.
Well, I guess before I start with a few things of this, I'm curious. Let's say from your own experiences, you mentioned you fell into the trap. Do you have any examples from that?
I mean, I tried. So recently, back in 2016, I tried to make a 30-minute short, and then I realized that it was so hard for me to, comprehend and adjust all those changes, and I didn't want to stay on a project like that for years. And if I kept like adjusting all those fixes in a very big project that's like 30 minutes long, it gets harder to comprehend, and then I get overwhelmed. And even like back then, I would say I'm gonna make my own pilot by the end of high school, and of
Mm.
course, I wouldn't be able to do that because I start to underestimate, or over. Is it underestimate? Yeah, underestimate the amount of work that's needed. Back at Cal Arts, there's this thing called the epic film trap, which is like after your first year at Cal Arts, most students already know, oh, I can make a film. I'm gonna make something big and epic for my second year film because I know how it's like to make a film. I don't really care about restrictions, so they go out all at it. And most of them never finish their second year film because they get too ambitious with it in that short amount of time, and also dealing with their own schedules. So I've also
So
had that too.
I'm also very curious about this because I never actually went to animation school. I actually went to a fine arts school and learned how to paint with oils and kind of just fell into this industry. But when you mention like epic films and underestimating time, is that because you have to like write the script, do storyboards, character design, animation, like encompassing all those things to try and make an epic?
It's that too, and also trying to like hit a certain production quality too. So some people, it's like the length of the film. So some people will go for like over 5 minutes for a short, and trying to keep it fully animated. And it's possible, like some students have done that, but it's not like something that's like very stable. And I think like a lot of people tend to overestimate their own skills too. So if you're trying to deal with like really complicated stuff, but then you just don't have enough experience to deal with it, then you start stalling, or you start re-scrapping that, or you start rewriting it, and you try to find other shortcuts, which is not a bad thing.
Hmm.
But I do think that if you have smaller projects, that's when you start discovering little tools. You start discovering like, oh shoot, I've encountered an error here. Now I know what that error is when I do pursue bigger projects. So, you know, the reason why I say start with smaller projects is so that you can also get a feel of what it's like to just make something.
Hmm.
And then eventually, like, you're gonna come across like hiccups or errors or things like that. And then when you find solutions to that, then you can move on to bigger stuff.
I think you definitely hit something there I wanted to cover too. And the only way to judge what you're missing in terms of the skill set you have as an artist is by completing projects. And if you keep them small, then you can have like a litmus test in terms of like, oh, the biggest time sink for this. This is an example. So like for a biggest time sink of this project, it was writing, and then you're like, okay, I need to get better at writing, or like have it beforehand. Maybe next small project you do would be like, oh, I wasn't really great at effects. Then you do some small effect studies, and next project can bring that on. Kind of like really gauging your skills as an artist as you grow with these small projects. So just going back to in terms of why I do a lot of studies is because I never really had that mindset to um, do big epics. I was more interested in world building, and it's hard to tell a story if you just want to world build. I was like fascinated with things like,
Dude,
oh, what does it mean for this? Okay, like people make these amazing sci-fi worlds, but then I'll be asking questions like, okay, what's like the luxurious good here, or what's the transportation? Like, I want to make little tests. I'm like, well, maybe this is a train city, just as an example, or maybe avionics have taken off, and I'm just fascinated with those like tiny bubbles. And when you look into those things, it's kind of like you have an overarching project, but you have these like tiny little shorts that feed into this major thing. And then eventually you'd be like, oh, I have all these assets that I can string together some narrative. And then that's how I kind of like, I react to my projects and I create narratives based on my tests. And I
that's a,
feel like that's the way I like to work.
yeah. Honestly, I wanted to add to that because I think like people tend to start overthinking about like what this project is, or how do we make things connect the dots or have a full arc or whatever. But even like small moments, like if it's just like a person just like running or a person just like sitting, or if it's just like a moment, well, I mean that's great because it's like you're building something upon it. Like the Dream Bandits trailer thing that I did, it actually never started as like a trailer that I had in mind, but it actually started with a series of like the cell shading look that I wanted to explore, and then suddenly I started coming up with a design that felt fun to work with, and then I just kept developing that, and then I started forming a world around that. So, that it's a great place to start. I think. Let me see if I can find like the super earliest like test that I did for that. It's like
Exactly.
I think it's this one. Yeah. So it's like it's a GIF, but it's like me just trying to explore what it's like to do that cell shaded look from like the early '80s and whatnot.
Do you zoom? Could you zoom into it before you
It's
close
it's
it?
it's an image. So it's like this is the size of
this
it.
no. Can like this magnifying?
It's a Tumblr GIF. So they had like,
Yeah.
and back then when I used Tumblr, it's like 2 megabytes maximum size.
Oh,
So it's one of
absolutely.
those things.
And just like if they want to see more images too, I sent you a few things over Discord in terms of like some of the projects I've worked, like tiny projects I've worked on.
Yeah, let me see if I can get it. Yeah, so Alan posted some stuff here.
If you maybe just scroll up a bit, just so I can give some context, a little bit higher up.
It's a bit loud.
Okay, so those guys here. So let's say the second image. If you can like blow that one up there. So that was just me being fascinated by. I was looking into the space race back in the 60s and stuff, but then I also started getting into what is like underwater welding. And so I was fascinated, like, well, what would it be like if you're in space welding stuff? And then afterwards, I started building a small narrative. If you close that image and scroll down a couple, keep scrolling down a bit more. So then, okay, so these images here. So then I started thinking, well, what happens if they're just like breaking down derelict ships and they come across a monolith? And I was just practicing with shaders that way. And then I started thinking about, okay, what about if the monolith was abandoned AI, and then the government would send these kind of like exo guys to pick up the AI guy. And then the last one was me thinking about if the suit was being sold commercially, what the commercials would look like. If you scroll down one more, that one. So I was thinking about like what the commercials of this world would look like for the suit, when it would hit, kind of thing. But, yeah, just keep projects small.
Yeah, and this type of stuff is like already, like it builds interest. It builds upon ideas and things like that. Okay, where was I? I was in the presentation, right?
Yes, you're right.
There we
Start
go.
with
Small
to add
projects.
subtitle.
Experiment with different approaches. So I think we kind of sort of talked about this in a way. Basically, what it is just experimentation. So when I make small projects or when I do some projects, I use it as a means to experiment with a new technique or a new way of how I approach animation. Recently, me and Alan, we've been experimenting with like 2D, 3D hybrid, and I've also been learning Blender for myself to learn how to composite things in 3D in my future animation work. So, I would just like follow Blender tutorials. I would like, I was also experimenting with things like, let me make that screen bigger. 3D scans. So there's an app on your iPhone that you can get called Scaniverse, and you can just like scan your surroundings, and then you can like import it into a software like Blender. And then I would have like these dancing dogs that I animated in the past, and just like have them dance and stuff, and just like have them like run around and things like that, just like for fun and just for me to learn something. And I've learned a lot. I've learned some things I should be aware of, bits and pieces. And I know we also try to experiment. Let's see if I can find the Dog Night stuff.
The Dog Night.
So another thing, and this is why collaboration, this is something that we'll talk about later down the line, is collaboration is important because Alan is super skilled at Blender, and I have some animation skills. So
A lot of animation skills. What are you talking about?
so like with we decided, okay, what if I animated the character, you did your Blender magic using shaders or 3D sets or whatnot, normal maps. Yeah, things like that. Alan, do you have anything to add to this?
Well, you did bring an interesting point. You might also want to make the stream window bigger
I
again.
have to like click.
Is it like an automatic thing that minimizes it, or
No, it's just that I hate seeing my slides big and my
no?
face tiny.
Let's see it, man. We got to see those slides. Give the people what they want. They want to
Well,
see pictures.
they want to see Dog Knight, so there's that.
Well, okay, so like say for this one here, I always had this idea of like automatic lighting, and I'm like, okay, games have been using lighting, automatic lighting with like platforms and stuff. Like, what's the difference between doing that with animation? So I proposed to Tonico, like, hey, let's do this collaboration. I want to do my shader mojo magic, and let's see what we can do, and not get caught up with trying to make 3D look like 2D. Just accept it for what it is, because a lot of times we'll find, well, I'll find like projects trying to like shoehorn 3D to make it look like 2D or 2D to make it look like 3D. But both of them have really cool qualities, and if you just make them speak and be strong for what they are, you could create a really cool and interesting style. And I always want to bring back to was it that one Popeye scene, the
Oh,
Sinbad?
Sinbad. Yeah, the diorama.
I don't know if you can find that or pull it up, but it's like I remember watching that as a kid. Like that's so cool, seeing like almost like a diorama maquette with like these cool lights and the 2D animation walking through. I thought it had a super unique look, and we have the tools now that are extremely accessible, and we can create those things without like like stop motion and stuff. We can just do that all within 3D. Really cool.
Yeah, and it's an important thing that you pointed out. Like, you're not trying to like, uh, turn something for something that it's not, or force something. It's more like taking it, playing the advantages of each medium. So that's something that like, that's the thing about experimentation. It's also about like learning how to take advantage of every tool or every approach, to make it work at its best and to come up with something new. So a fourth one that I made a video recently about this, which is like working smarter, finding ways to work smarter. So sometimes what I do is that I will just animate like presets or pre things where I think this is an example, like where I would just like animate an effect once and then just like lay them out in different scenes. So like, let's say it's a tiny explosion or a clash or like a shine effect, then instead of like reanimating stuff, I could just redo things. And I don't know what I was doing there, but yeah. So for something like Crayon Dragon, I mean, I think so. The thing I wanted to show here was that I actually just like rotated and moved the head around, instead of just redraw it, because in 2D animation people love to just redraw it, but instead, why not just like have a loop of, I think for this one I just had the character just bob up and down stationary, and then I just like matched it to the stairs. Oh, and this one, basically the head. I think here I was just trying to explain that the head here is just like one drawing, and I could just easily replace it, so
Oh
I
my
could
god.
like change the character, and it added to the
Yeah.
comedy effect. So just things like that, and working smarter. And this is something that we can talk about soon, which is like priority. And Alan, you work smarter all the time. You do
Um,
procedural stuff a
yeah,
lot.
procedure stuff, modular stuff. So as you grow as an artist, you'll start finding what kind of how you react to creativity as an artist. And I'm very reactionary, so I like to just generate stuff and just react to it rather than like fully flesh out a character and like draw it all out. I'm like, this is how it should be, and that's it. I kind of like looking at options 1,000 times, like, oh yeah, this is cool, and I like that little bit of chaos in it, just unexpected results. Because sometimes you'll get so caught up within your own prejudices of like color choices and shape language that it's hard to kind of step out of that mindset. So if I have some sort of like modular way of doing things and adding in some sort of let's say the shader randomly picks colors, and I can sometimes get unexpected results within the frame that I've set. So yeah, it's like it's important to think about these things too, because once in a while you'll hit the dreaded creative block.
Dude,
And
yeah. I
uh,
mean, if you were on your computer, dude, like it's like, oh man, if you could like have a bit of examples, because you were experimenting with like pots and stuff that would like auto texture itself depending on like how it was rotated or moved around the scene, which is crazy.
Yeah, so yeah, basically, just a quick rundown. What it would do is like imagine you had a vase or a pot, and then I don't want to get too technical with terms, but then you kind of like put a texture on it, and the shader will randomly move the texture up and down, but then it'll also choose a random color, and then there'll be masks on where the patterns are, and it'll just choose a random color for that. So when you generate a bunch of like the same shapes, it'll keep switching the color and where the pattern direction is. So you already have like the artistic input in it, but it's creating iterations of it. So it already feels like it's part of the world. And it's like, whoa, I can generate, a million vases for this vase shop so that somebody can smash all this,
Dude, and it's like, and the important thing is that it feels seamless, so it doesn't feel like it's copied and pasted. And I'm not against that. I kind of like the look where it feels janky,
Yeah.
but it's like ways to make it feel authentic and handmade without the extra labor of having to do all that extra stuff.
Hmm.
All right, let's move on because I know we started late. I'm sorry about that, guys. It was my fault. I'm an idiot.
Have a consistent schedule.
Have a consistent schedule. So, okay, this doesn't mean like have. It doesn't only mean like have a tight schedule where every time after work ends, let's say you have a full time job, and you spend like 6 hours after your work hours working. But it's also just like more like just something consistent. So sometimes like I set myself a low standard where I say I'm just gonna work for an hour, no 2 hours, because usually for me it takes me like 30 minutes to get into the flow state. And the flow state basically is like you get into the groove of things and you build that momentum of working. So I usually give myself 2 hours after my full-time job just to like do my own stuff. And sometimes it's also when I say talk about consistent schedule, it's also about learning how to adapt with your own lifestyle so that I can do my other hobbies too. So it's like, okay, I know I like doing some sports. I know that I like having the time for myself. So I want to make sure that I have a schedule that allows room for that too. And I try not to. Sometimes I'm passionate. I like to overwork or really go over the work that I set for myself. But I think it's also important to say, okay, this is when I should stop because it teaches you like just to keep it consistent and to keep that energy going without burning yourself out too quickly. And I've fallen into that trap many times. And Alan.
Yeah, no, there's definitely some interesting points here. I think I can speak to like when you're just getting into the industry, you'll fall into this notion where you just have to continue doing that kind of personal work because you had all that time and you're trying to readjust to work hours. Just before, if I continue, do you have any other like images or tests? Because maybe they're just staring blankly and have a consistent schedule. Maybe there's like some cool tests.
Oh, for this one, I wasn't really gonna show a test per se, but I was going to like show an example of like a schedule. And a schedule, it's abstract. So sometimes I have this thing where this is basically like a very quick put together shot list that I made. Here, let me enlarge that. So I made a shot list of like, and it's so disorganized, it's so casual, but it's just a shot list of like projects that I'm working on and just like ticking off. Okay, I'm done with cleanup. I'm done with color, and just like having a visual like schedule or a checklist, like it keeps the boat floating, and I can kind of gauge how much stuff I need to get done or how much stuff I could just sacrifice. Is it important? So this is for a project that I'm currently working on. I got a lot of cleanup done, and I thought about adding these shots. So it also helped. It's satisfying. Like
it's actually so funny because I don't do any of the schedule stuff like this. I'm maybe more chaotic in terms of how I do things. Like I like to keep everything mentally here, or I'll just like jot down on a notepad just like something quickly. Because maybe this is just the way I think about things. It's like I don't want to, and this speaks for like different artist types. So like I like keeping things a little free form to allow me to like create wiggle room. Just to try new things out, because I feel like if I have a set schedule, then I will be determined to hit those deadlines. Much like when I do at work, we'll have a deadline. I'll do everything I can to hit it. But if it's for my own stuff, I'll have like maybe just open doors everywhere. Just like, oh yeah, I'll go down this path of like, looking into material shaders, but then I'll do 180 and look into like, I don't know how to use Unreal or something, and then go back into like studying fundamentals of the masters, and then switch around and learn about like mathematics or something. Like I'm just so freeform in that sense.
And honestly, that is also not a problem too. Like everyone works differently.
Mm.
I think like if you want to like, if you have this certain drive where you just want to get stuff done, a schedule does help. If you just want to get something done and really quickly, a tight schedule does help because it now that you have a deadline, there's a bit of that urgency. Sometimes, like for me, when I set deadlines or a schedule, it's like I'm thinking about, oh my god, CTN is coming up soon, or a film festival is coming up soon. Maybe I'll premiere my magnum opus of my peen-shaped penguin dancing in front of the big screen, and I will set my schedule according to that.
Glorious day.
Yeah. Alan's more like free form for his personal stuff. For me, it's like I do want to get stuff done, so a schedule helps me and it helps me visualize that. So if you guys want to think about getting stuff done, a schedule helps. But otherwise, if you just want to have fun with it, go free, be free, and just like go down like several different rabbit holes.
Mm. Writing helps a lot, though.
Yeah.
I'll give you that. Just write something down.
Wait, I already talked about find ways to work smarter. What the hell? I wrote that twice. Write and plan. So writing and planning. So for me, I always write. Sometimes I write shot lists. So like in that visual thing that I showed earlier, like sometimes I'll remind myself, oh, it's that shot. Or sometimes I storyboard stuff before I animate things, or thumbnail. When I do YouTube, because I also make YouTube videos, I write a script so I can just say, hey guys, it's Tanika Pentoa, and today I'd like to talk about shits and giggles, haha. And it's just like, I think for me, like, I think, to me, I used to live the life of like being free and adaptable, but at the same time, it also led me to be very disorganized when I started tackling bigger projects that needed more time fleshing out or needed more like thought arrangement. So writing it down helps. One thing that I've been doing recently, because I want to get into writing more, I actually want to write more stories. So sometimes what I do is that I copy and paste like structures, or things like Save the Cat, or Netflix has their own like pitch Bible document, and they have like all these things that they want to hit. So like for example, let me get an example. So I looked at a Netflix pitch document, and they were talking about like certain structures, and I actually just like copied that and just like made a list of like what I got from that presentation, and then I would say, okay, what if I just use this as a template? So when I start writing my own pitch Bible, I would actually just like, use that same template and just answer those questions. So having that gives me structure. And I think like writing and planning, that's what it's good for. It's like helping you give structure to your ideas or whatever you want to explore. Do you write and plan, Alan?
I was going to bring something up interesting here that it's always great to use templates, like you mentioned, to at least give you some sort of figure, because it's kind of like the similar effect when you're going to draw something, and it's that dreaded blank canvas. It's a little less intimidating when you already have some sort of structure that somebody else has prepared for you who likes doing that kind of stuff. And I think just going a bit more forward with that thing, just find people, in terms of writing, find authors you really enjoy and see how they kind of structure things, and maybe try to mimic it a little bit, just try to get into their mindset. And that's how you start developing your own style and writing style, just through mimicry. Then afterwards you can undulate it and modulate it, and eventually it becomes your own thing. But it's always important to like see how professionals do it and learn through mimicry, and over time you'll pick up some of the key lessons there.
And
learned.
Everyone has their own style. Like, one of my favorite books, and I always say this all the time, one of my favorite books is The Last Unicorn, but good lord, that book is so flowery in their language. where it's like her heart turned to sand and sank like this. I'm just like, oh my god.
Well, I mean, what about Tolkien and his like
Oh god,
thousand
yeah. Oh.
pages of like, welcome to the Shire. You
So
know, the gleaming,
I mean, yeah, like it's like
sun-kissed grass.
it's like you absorb every source of inspiration. Like watch, watch obscure movies, watch bad movies too.
Speaking
Watch
the
foreign
language.
films because I think for me, like even when I watched The Great Gatsby with Leonardo DiCaprio. It got bad ratings, but I loved it. I liked it. Form your own opinions. But yeah, like form your own opinions. Yeah, and just absorb as many different forms of inspiration, and maybe you'll get something from that thing. Even though it might not be the best thing that you saw, it might be like the most interesting, or there's something that's worth exploring in that.
Exactly.
I guess we can move on to. Okay, so this is documenting your process. Alan, you're a fan of this too. I'm a huge fan of this. So you want to go? You want to go first this time?
You want me to go first, documenting
Well,
your process? All right. Okay.
Because
So it's like, how do I put this? What analogy can I think of? Well, it's like the journey in a sense, right? Like the final result, people can see it. It could be like, especially with animation, you're like, here's a 5-second thing. They see it as is, but then behind that 5 second could be, days or weeks worth of work, and it's always important to showcase how you arrived at the end point. Because if you just always showcase like 5 seconds worth of animation, it might kind of like skew the perception of how things are made, and at least to show how things are made, it can not romanticize as much the work that goes into it. It's like it's actually real hard work that goes into a lot of this documentation stuff, especially like with kind of the shader stuff that you see in movies. Like how the snow looks realistic, but maybe you might see it for a few seconds, or after a while you just start focusing on the characters more and just ignore it. But it's like months worth of research going to some of the stuff that it's important to see this, because after a while then you like look back, it's like, wow, it's a good comparison of like how far you've come from where you started.
yeah, and I mean, for me, like when I work on my own stuff, I always turn on the hit and record every time I'm working on something, or I try to. And look at this, like I have folders of just like projects that I'm working on the side, and I just have folders. Of like recorded things of me just like animating, and I could like do stuff with this. I could organize this and turn it into like a YouTube video or a tutorial series. But it's also there for me to sort of recount on a lot of the experimentations that I did, and keep a record of that discovery there. So if I wanted to replicate it, I actually can resort back to a recording that I did.
One of the most important things too, I do this a lot when I'm working, and if it's something complicated like trying to show a director how the shaders work, if I just document my process and just go through some of the parameters, just record everything with the viewport, so you'll just see the changes, submit that to them, they can like scrub through it and be like, I like this, and circle it, as opposed to trying to tell me what they're looking for. They already have a visual cue of what they're looking, like they'll just like, stop the time, like, hey, timestamp, blah blah blah, this is what I'm looking for. I already know what parameters are there, and it's easier to describe things visually than it is to just type everything up, because I find like everyone has a different image of what language it is, and like when you say, what's that famous thing, apple, we both think of two different kinds of apple. But if you just showcase like, hey, this is what it looks like, what do you think, then they can grab that, paint over it, maybe write notes on it, and it's easier to communicate that way because we're in a visual field.
Exactly. I mean, I think like for me, when I was working on that 3D scan thing with the dancing dogs, like I was on the call with you because you were walking me through Blender and how to use it, but I was also recording on the side, just so that I have a record of that for myself, that I can use later on, and see all the stupid mistakes that I made too.
Yeah.
Okay, this one. Okay, to me, teaching, I learned a lot from like teaching my process, and you don't have to be the best of the best to be able to teach, because there's a lot of like really highly talented artists that can't teach, and they're terrible teachers, and there are some teachers who are just really good, and you learn so much even if your work and their work doesn't match with the work that you want to do. The reason why I would suggest, like, once you have an understanding of your process, try teaching it, so that when you teach it, it kind of shows that you have an understanding of what you do. You can explain your thought process, and to see if it is a system that works and it can be transferred to everyone that wants to try it out for themselves. And it also gives clarity to the structure or the pipeline of whatever project that you're on. So I would highly encourage everyone to make a casual tutorial video, a step-by-step. Alan does a lot of video tutorials, like really casual ones. My friends do it too. There's a lot of students that do it too. And, the way I see teaching too, like I said, you don't have to be the best of the best. But, just being able to explain why you're doing things a certain way, like what is your thought process, I think that's really cool to hear about. Like, I want to hear a personal thought process of someone who is maybe an amateur or has no industry experience, and someone who says, I am going to work in the Glen Keane way, or this is how Richard Williams did it, so I'm going to draw the ball like this. And it'd be nice to see someone just talk, be more personal about why they're solving problems the way they do in their work.
Yeah. And just to add more into it, I definitely agree with you that even if you're out wanting to do tutorials, it's really important just to understand how to communicate your process. Because if you're looking to work in this industry that is creativity, it's very vital to communicate your ideas. And having just some teaching experience will only further your knowledge in the subject that you're teaching. And for example, when I do my Blender tutorials, I always take it from the point of view that someone is new Blender, and I'll not use a lot of big, difficult technical terms that I use on a higher level when I'm talking at work. I'll try and simplify things. I'll try and streamline the process so that they understand the basic workflow of it, and then they can expand later on. Because I don't want to give the process I give, because it's going to be too daunting, where I'll be like, well, you got to consider, how to clean these nodes up. You got to consider, the rendering times. No, I'm like, this is the process of it, and have fun and explore. Because all those other little things, you'll learn as you grow as an artist, or learn naturally as you do more work. You'll be like, oh, this thing's starting to slow down a lot. And you YouTube or Google a video of how to optimize something. Hopefully.
Yeah, you reminded me of there's a John Carmack video where he's explaining virtual reality to different age groups. So he starts off with a 7-year-old, and then working towards a college person, and then towards a full adult in the tech industry. And it's really fascinating how he starts off really simple and more easier to understand. Then they go on from more complex topics. One thing that's also a practice for being able to let's say talk about your process, or to be able to present or things like that. I would highly encourage everyone to do a bit of journaling. Because journaling is all about putting your thoughts down into paper. Something happened, and you can talk about how that made you feel, things like that. So that's a good way to get better at being able to communicate what you're trying to get across. Because before, it was hard for me to get things across, but the more I talked about things, the more I did journaling, the more it was easier to sort of talk about why I would do it this way, or why I did things certain ways. So that definitely helped me big time. And journaling can be good for anything. For if you're having a crisis in life, you can think about that. But it also helped me for personal projects and things like assessing. Anything else you wanted to add to that?
Nope. I think we definitely covered a lot of ground with that one.
Sweet. So this one is optional because I mean it's not. It's like for people who want to think about how do I think about the money aspect of things. So you can if you're like making comics or merch, like let's say you come up with a character and that character becomes well known and you start making like dolls or stuffed toys out of that. I mean that's one way. For me, like I know that I like I like watching and learning from tutorials, so and I like making them too. Okay, because I know that I buy this, there has to be other people that might want to look into this, and I have a lot of things I want to offer on the table. So all those recordings that I showed, like I said, I can compose that into a video course or a tutorial, or I can reorganize it so I can make it educational. That maybe I can put it on YouTube for free, still monetize off of it. Maybe I could use it as like Patreon like exclusive. So if someone wanted to pay me a bit of extra, then they have access to these files. So that's how I would do it because I know I'm a person who buys tutorials and stuff like that. So that's kind of why I focus on that. So if you want to if you want to do things and find monetary benefit or opportunities from it, the way I like to think is what I would pay for. What would you say to that, Alan?
I think it's something I haven't really considered too much because I'm more so for the pursuit of knowledge. But in terms of like passive income, an artist, I mean, everyone needs to make some sort of income. So looking to those opportunities to generate those passive incomes might help you in terms of like saving up for new equipment that might aid you in your artistic endeavors. But I think you have more experience in this than I do. So yeah.
Yeah, everyone's different. I mean,
Yeah.
like I do believe in think some there's things that still need to be free, because it's like I love doing what I do, and
Hmm.
for me like the money thing, it's like an idea that can be available later on, but other than that, like I mean, these are just like ideas if you want to make income out of it. And honestly I highly encourage it if you do want to make it more of a business. That's pretty much it. Um I think we kind of just talked about
Yeah.
this. Yeah, we did. See, I made this slide. I made this
Anything
presentation like a while
overlooked?
ago, so it's like we covered this branding, whatever. I'm skipping that. Have a supportive community.
Very
So
important.
this is pretty important because it's a lot of things. One is we're social beings, and we parts of us want support and validation, and doing art, especially personal art, can be a very lonely venture, especially if you're a very ambitious person, because it's like only you understand like the hardships that come with it. And sometimes it's kind of insane how much we put ourselves into these things, and it's also easy for us to have self-doubts about our journey. So I definitely think like having a supportive community is important because you inspire each other, you help out each other. Like me and Ellen, we talk almost every time, or during the week, because like we have a lot of things we want to talk about, how we want to share ideas and how to problem solve that. I sometimes I'll work on something, and then I'll I'll work on something and I'll show a work in progress to my coworkers who become lifelong friends, and they would draw over my stuff and say, "Oh, think about this stuff," and it stuff like that is super helpful. But having that support and having that approval feels good. It makes me want to move forward. So I definitely think having a community is highly important. I think I have a clip that I wanted to show. Let me see if I can find it. But
See that
basically,
clip.
yeah, it basically I just recorded me getting feedback from my friend Rune. Rune Beneke and Chris. I think his wife is in the chat, Tiffany. Um, Let me see if I can find it. So yeah, I record. Like I said, I try and record everything because it's like food for thought. Animation. This is it. So this is what it kind of looked like. So when I was working on like the vampire dance sequence, he was kind of like giving me tips on how to streamline my process, how to what things to think about when it comes to like animation, human mechanics, and it's just us like talking at like 11 p.m. or 12 a.m. or 3 a.m. Look, Chris, this is my friend Chris. He's so sleepy and that. So there's that. Super super helpful.
No, there's times you hit me up at like 2 in the morning for Blender stuff too.
Yeah, because I'm a nocturnal person. What do you? Yeah, anything you wanted to add with
The community
stuff?
I think you've covered a lot of it. Like basically, it's just to, like you mentioned, it's a very lonely journey at times, especially if you want to make it into the industry, and just having some sort of community you can go back to rely on. Like, how's this looking? How's building those friendships that can elevate you into the industry, or just having someone else with that kind of creative mindset could be very valuable. Um, yeah, I don't really think of anything beyond that at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, some people find a community through like. I just want to add, like, so I think some people they're trying to find communities through like social media, which I think that's the next thing that I'll talk about. Social media, Discord. Some people are super friendly. I know for me, like I usually like to stay close to people that I know in real life. I don't really like try and dive too deep into like strangers online. I'm very
Actually, or if I can interrupt, I think that there was a small change though. Like I remember way back, we'd actually have someone brought this up. Just made me think about like forums way back in the day, where that's where we met a lot through those older forums. But then as you grow older, like you want to choose more selectively the kind of like feedback you're getting, and then when you start working, you can introduce those into your circle of friends, and that's how you can slowly grow that way. And there's something else I just wanted to bring up too in terms of community. Like you might have a lot of feedback at times too, or critiques, but it's all right to say no to some of those critiques too. Like that, while they may be valuable, maybe the pursuit of your own vision as something very specific that you want to see through.
Yeah, that's a good point because the people that I tend to stick close to are people that I know they will give me feedback, but they're also very respectful. Whereas, of course, on the internet, especially during the Newgrounds days, there were a lot of like, screamo kids going to be like, "Hey, asshole, you're not drawing it properly. Draw it like this, or I'll beat you up." It was like that kind of mentality.
Yeah.
Social media is a tool, so I mean, I don't think I would have been prolific. It's so weird saying that. I don't think I would have been sort of known in the work that I do without social media. And social media has reaped some good rewards, and at the same time, it can also bring destruction if you don't really know how to use it in a more mature manner. And I feel like social media is a whole topic of its own because I've dealt with the worst of it, and I've also dealt with the great things about it. And I know I learned overall my whole usage of social media is I try to not put too much of my life on social media or myself because I think there needs to be like a healthy separation between myself and social media because I also recognized some of the unhealthy habits that I had with social media, such as like looking at how many likes I got or did it match with the previous posts, and you can't view your work that way, or it'll stifle your growth if you start having doubts about your work because it didn't perform as well on social media. But it's great for like advertise, like if you wanted to share promote a project that you're working on, it's great. If you want to promote a film or project that you worked on with other groups of people, it's great for sharing that with the community.
And I think I like to touch more on that stuff too. Like I think when we first started, all like the social media was starting to become more popular, we all fell into that trap of like, oh, how many likes am I going to get today? Ooh, kind of cater like, oh, this drawing hit all those likes. Let me keep pumping that thing out, and it's starting to guide your kind of like artistic endeavors, and it might start like like focusing you down this one channel that you're if see now that's the thing, like I don't know if it's wrong to do that, but if you're looking for monetary uh income through that means, and by all means do it that way. But sometimes I come from a fine art background where I'm like, what is it that you're trying to say? What is your own vision and your own voice that you're trying to seek? And if you start catering it to the viewers, then you're slowly losing that unique voice of yours through through likes, um so yeah, it's interesting. I don't know what my point is, but I just got circled around for a second. I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna make this stray like good point," but I'm like, "Wait a minute!" But there are others who do it, and it's completely fine. Because
You know,
art is so subjective.
art is so subjective, and also there's a lot of like people on social media that have a really distorted view on how the world works, or not distorted, but I think it's stuff that I don't agree with. So let's talk about the mindset of growth. For me, when I think about growth, I think of like self improvement. I think of improving my character, or improving my health, or learning something. To me, that's growth. But to some of the influencers out there, it's like growth, taking over the world, getting bigger, making profits, and it's like the total opposite of what I thought growth was. And of course, like social media, yeah, it's easy to sort of like um, have doubts and have certain feelings of your work based on how it performs. So,
Agree.
okay, we're nearly done actually. So the last number 13, know when to end a project. So I know we went sidetracked and talked about many different topics. We might have gone straight away from personal projects, but coming back to personal projects, it's important to know when to end things, or when to say, okay, I'm done with it. You know the quote, like, art is never finished but abandoned.
Yeah.
All when I think about it, all the student shorts that I've done, or all the short films that I've done, by the time I had to submit it, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to keep working on it so I could perfect it. I'm going to add more scenes. I'm going to do this and that. But then you also have to say, okay, I made the deadline. That's it. I can't touch it anymore. It's done. And that is also very hard to do, especially if you're someone who is a perfectionist. So, for me, like, I know that when I work on projects, so the City of Secrets trailer that I put online, it was originally 30 seconds, and then I got the green lit to do, or we got, because Victoria Ying was also like really helpful in that regard too. We got the green light to add another 30 seconds to the trailer, but then I also know that I don't think I can spend any more time on it, and also the budget. So we had to say, you know what, we're just going to animate in threes. We're not going to fix it at the end, and it's done. Leave it as that. And so just know when to end a project. If it's a project that you just want to finish, I would say like have a few shots where maybe, like, let's say for short film, for example, maybe the talk isn't. Did I say talk? Sorry, I'm reading the chat at the same time. Maybe the film or the shot isn't as the shots of that film aren't as polished as the other ones are polished. So, yeah. Do you have anything to say on that?
I think you mainly covered all of it. Like in terms of like know when to end a project, there was some interesting comments here. Like usually it's when people lose interest in a project, and
That's
something that might happen too. Sometimes like the reason you might lose interest is because maybe the experience you have with the particular topic or a story you're trying to say or narrative is you don't have that inspirational well or creativity at the moment, and you'll get that through life experiences, perhaps through a movie or a book or something you read that will reignite that passion for that project you have that you can pick up at a later date. And I think that's something that to say too, because sometimes you might have these projects that are really complicated or maybe mature in tone, and ourselves as artists, we might not have the life experience yet to tell those stories. It's kind of like, when you're a teenager, you're like, oh, I want to say this story about this adult character, and then now when you reflect, like if you still have those projects, you reflect back on it, it's like, oh my goodness, as a teenager, I had no idea what it's like to be an adult. Now I'm an adult, like I gotta change all this.
Yeah, I mean, we grow up all the time.
Yeah.
So whatever project we started up with, it definitely doesn't reflect on who we are as people now. Like all the shorts that I did in the past, sometimes I cringe because it's like, oh, I know exactly what I was like back then. I know what I was thinking back then. So it's hard for me to watch my student shorts. Maybe except my first year student short at CalArts, because I know that I just wanted to be an idiot, which we'll get to soon. Yeah, I can always rewatch like 48-hour short films that I did because I know that I was being silly and whatever. And going back to the topic of like knowing when to drop or abandon a project, that's a really tricky one because I think it's also important. It's important to acknowledge that we do change, and it is okay to like choose projects or choose ventures that best suit our current needs. And another part of me also thinks this too, because I start so many projects and I never finish them to a certain degree, or I never like just drop them entirely, meaning that I don't just finish it, right? So because I do that so many times, because I felt maybe the project was too uncomfortable for me or too hard, it became a habit. So every new project that I started, and if I had an inkling of those smaller issues that felt like the thing that I felt back then in a previous project that I just left, it starts becoming more common. The habit of just starting something and quitting it. So I think it is also important to like have a set goal of like, this is where I'm going to stop and this is where I want to finish at, and just try your best to go at it, even if you have to like sacrifice the quality, because quitting too much becomes too easy. It becomes a habit. That's another side of it. But then at the same time, it's also important to figure out which projects best suit your needs, or what projects are important for your needs, because sometimes you can be on a project and maybe it's not to your liking, you're not passionate about it, it's painful for you, and the pain becomes so unbearable that you can't do anything but to address it, to stop what you're doing and to sort of reassess what you want to do. So it's a whole thing about knowing who you are. Like, do you just want to finish something, or do you just want to find like really just explore yourself? And that's a whole other topic of its own. Yeah.
I'm actually just curious, or do you have any examples of how you felt that way with any projects you've published in the past? Like, do you have anything that comes to mind that you're like, looking back at it now, was it should I have continued it, or should I have just dropped it sooner?
So I'm definitely working that the one with the dragon transformation that I showed. So I recently just returned to that because I started it years ago, and now I just said I did.
Do you have
so
it on
much.
you, or do you have like an example of it just to pull it up?
Let me see if I can find. So I've been redoing. I actually redid all the shots that needed redoing. So I'm pretty much done with like cleanup for all the shots that I set out to do. Let me see if I can find some. So I only have a GIF of it, but it's this project with So I recently came back to it, and I'm seeing what I can do to do with it. Part of me, that's the reason why I left my full time, to sort of like, address unfinished business.
Yeah.
Okay, we're on our second to the last one thing. which is like don't try to predict success for your projects. Um, so I don't know if you have anything to add to this, but I have a lot to say about it. Um,
We can have a dialogue. Go
okay,
back
we'll
and
have a
forth.
dialogue. So I know. I think part of the reason why I started becoming more doubtful of pursuing certain personal projects is because I'm always predicting that there'll be some form of reception or response from it. And when I don't get that, I start having self doubt again. Like, oh my god, maybe it's not worth it. And
This ties into the social media thing.
it ties to that too. I think that's a part of it. But I think people tend to expect too much of a return from it, whatever that is. Like maybe it's like it'll build your career or it'll get you followers, whatever it is, and maybe it doesn't hit those goals. Then you start feeling
Uh,
like, oh shit, I'm a failure. I failed. This
see.
wasn't worth it. And
So, and just let me sorry, let me just recap. So you're basically projecting notions to what it might lead to. So you're saying if I do this, then I'll get my foot in the industry, or I'll be recognized by so and so by doing this. Is
yeah,
that okay?
and like I think that all the time. Like when I finished some proof of concept videos I did in the past, like it did give me some opportunities at work too, but it definitely didn't like hit the opportunity that I personally wanted for myself. And then now I'm thinking that I'm thinking things differently where it's just like I'm just gonna finish. I'm gonna learn from this. I'm gonna learn a lot from it. I'm going to use this as a learning experience. I'm doing it for myself, which is always very hard because we want that. We want the rewards from it. We want the benefits from it.
Mhm.
But I've been trying to think more about this is just for myself.
Yeah, and
Um,
like,
yeah, go on.
sorry, I'm just gonna add on to like art. I think we kind of forget sometimes where art originally came from. It's for the expression of self and how you, as an artist, filter the world through your own eyes and through your own aesthetic visions. It's super unique that way. So you're kind of like trying to internalize how you see the world, and then you put it onto paper, whatever medium you have, through music, sound, what have you, to showcase how you feel about things and to communicate it to others, as opposed to trying to communicate what others want. I think it's a very important point that you say,
Hmm.
like, try not to put too much on it, because it is almost like you're inflicting those notions to yourself, because it is a part of yourself you're trying to, showcase.
Yeah, I mean, I know someone in the chat said, "Is it dangerous to set your expectations too high?" Just from my experience, I probably, I guess it depends on the expectations, but I try to set it as low or something that feels realistic for me. Like, at least, like for me, it's like the expectations. Like I learned something from it, or this can be used for pitching later on. So something that's like realistic and something that I have more control on, rather than saying, "Oh, I hope this gets noticed by like Netflix or all these other like big names," and then I'll get all this. No, I mean that's way too high. And it's kind of delusional in some forms. I mean, it can happen, but
Oh, and like, yeah,
I try to keep it. I try to keep my expectations where it's close to everything in my power, if that makes sense.
definitely. Like, you know yourself as the art. You're like your worst critique or critic. Sorry, they go, and you know yourself a lot. So you can almost tell if you're being too hard on yourself, where if you hear those voices like, just stop it, just don't do it. I'm like, no, but I need to. It's like, no, you're being too hard on yourself because you want to express stuff.
Yeah.
It Yeah, and that's what, like, it ties into having a good relationship with your art. Like, don't have this negative, like almost you can feel that negative energy channeling into your art. You just want to not have that. It doesn't really do any good to anybody. You can really see it, and if you're enjoying art, or if people are really having fun, or like you can really see it in their art, like the joy of it, the joy of creation, the joy of creativity, and just having that good relationship and not having those negative thoughts, because we might not be experienced enough to showcase or to draw from whatever things we're trying to do yet.
Right. I know. Shoot, I keep losing my chain of thought because like I'm listening at the same time, and it's like I'm also like trying to think about things for myself. But it's kind of like you want. It's like you said, you want to have a healthy relationship with your art because I guess this might be stretching it, and maybe you guys can stop me here and say, Tanika, you're full of BS. But
I'll say it.
the passion of like having you have for art, it's like having a kid, I guess, where it's like you want to be the best. You want to be like the best parent for that kid, where you're both having a very mutual relationship, and not having like that kid. You have like super high expectations for it, and you can't love your kid because that kid doesn't make that really high expectation. I mean, maybe that's stretching it. I think.
Interesting analogy.
Yeah, maybe that's stretching it. So that's the only thing. I'm improvising here, guys.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is, I try to keep a healthy relationship with my projects, where I can say, okay, you know, this is good for what it is. I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start looking at it and agreeing to all the things I that I benefited or that I learned from making this, or all the good things that come from making it, and then really focusing on that rather than like, oh, it didn't hit those expectations, screw it.
Okay.
I guess I guess we have oh, whoops, woo, spoiler. I guess we're on our last point that we want to talk about, um, which is be an idiot.
Like, when you showed me this, like before this chair, like, what are you trying to get at this?
Well, what I'm
Yeah,
saying is that, yeah. So maybe being an idiot is so again a stretch. I like stretching, by the way, in case you guys didn't know. Um, but basically, what I'm trying to say is it's okay to like lower your standards, because sometimes like if you have like high standards for yourself, you can't you can't really finish stuff, or you have doubts about finishing stuff, and you want to have fun with it. Sometimes when I have fun with things, I like to make fun, I like to be a goofball, I like to make silly things, and maybe that brings me some joy or some fun with the things that I do. Like all the 48-hour films that I worked on, we know that it was made for fun, and we were all being silly, and that is the fun of it, and we can all celebrate that without having like the fear or doubt of like being judged by everyone, which of course can happen. But I mean, it's fun, like being able to allow myself to make mistakes, or allow myself to not be the best, or sometimes go the opposite direction and make really crude things, or make people go like, this is so weird and silly, but whatever. And a part of me has fun with that. So I think what it is, basically, what I'm trying to say is just have like a healthy relationship with the things that you do, where you can sort of make fun of yourself doing these things or for your projects.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm seeing a lot of things in terms of people saying expectations, but I think it's more so like allow yourself to have fun. Just expectations seem to have like these standards, and standards mean sometimes you have certain prejudices towards like how you're supposed to convey something. But if you allow yourself to be free from that, just like to draw those silly things, to allow yourself to, like, let's say if you're, just as some examples, so we can have some images in our head. Let's say if you're an artist and all you're doing are characters, and you've never really touched environments, and when you do environments, you just have this like abnormally high standard because you've seen and you're comparing yourself with other artists in terms of how environment should be, don't do that. Allow yourself to have fun. Have silly shapes. Sure, they may be air quotes mistakes in your eyes, but it's just a learning process because you're trying to conceive how to do those things. And if you're not, if you're trying to follow your rules or well, I don't like calling art having rules because it's so free form, but if you're trying to follow a set tutorial and you're getting frustrated, that might not just be the kind of workload flow that you agree with. And just again, just have fun, do silly shapes, make an environment piece that is full of mistakes so you can look back at it, reflect and laugh as you gain more experiences. Is that something more or less that you're thinking about?
Yeah, definitely. Because there are times where I do animation stuff where I'm experimental or where I don't in between every god dang drawing.
Yeah.
And some I get some comments saying like, "This is so choppy. Why is this all in like 4s and 8s?" It's like, why not?
Yeah. No, yeah, it's a good point too because I've tried to do some animations in the past and I'd have no concept of what like I mean I understand the lingo of frames, but sometimes I'll animate everything like every frame, everything moves at once. So like when you play, it's like like beginner mistakes, right? But like when you look at, I always like bringing up like older Eastern European cartoons. You look at it, it's like it's full of weird. It's very weird to look at, but intriguing in a sense because it doesn't really have that flow that we're so used to seeing. And I think if it is interesting, then it's kind of cool, to see. As long as it's interesting to the eye, people who are critiquing those kind of things just have notions, or they've only looked at one certain way of animation, or maybe way of like how characters are drawn, and it might be harder for them to open up to understand what we're the uniqueness of these things are coming from. It might be just exercising that analytical voice of theirs.
Yeah, or they're being like super biased too of like what is considered the true or right way of
Yeah.
working. And I get that all the time. Whatever. I mean, one of the best advice I heard is that like, or not the best advice, but it's one of those things that was casually thrown. But I think it's good to anyone can learn the rules. Anyone can learn the principles of whatever if they spent time. Take things slow and really studying that. But what can't really be taught is instinct. So instinct relies on adapting, problem solving, being creative and being inventive, even if that means breaking the rules. And there's not a lot of people that can do that unless they really went and experimented and tried different things, from making silly things, really casual things, to something that they've worked super hard on. And that's when they start fleshing out their own voice or their own approaches. So instinct is something that can't really be taught, but it can definitely be like explored and harnessed and talked about. Like if let's say someone does something really interesting but it breaks all the rules and people have a discussion about it, what works, what doesn't, I mean, it can lead to really good things.
Yeah, I agree with that, definitely. And I think we just like reading some stuff here in the chat about the UPA style, and I agree with that. But it's just like, um, as long as, yeah, I think you said like having discussions around certain things that are interesting is key too. Just like when someone's trying something new out, it's gonna be different and it's gonna be hard to talk about or critique. So I think someone's talking about like if you work on something unique and it's not getting any views or reception or engagement, it's mainly because the public might not have anything that they can compare it to, or they don't have an understanding where it's from. So usually the more unique it is, then the less it's harder to describe what it is. But I'm sure people will be like, when they see it, like, that's interesting, that's fascinating, but there's no cognitive bias of like, where can I draw from that? Have I seen it somewhere else? And so it's really hard to critique something that's unique.
It's super hard to critique something that's like way too unique or way too experimental, because it's like, okay, I mean, what can you add to this? I mean, if I gave like normal traditional like feedback that can work in, let's say, a more mainstream style. I don't think it would do this style any service unless that person wanted to work in a place that has a very
Yeah.
mainstream sort of style. It's what it is.
And I think that's why when we look at stuff from the past, I can't think of anything right now. Well, what's that? Um, who created Last Unicorn? Radkin and Bass, was that it? Or who?
I think the animation team was Topcraft. They disbanded. Some of them went to form
Right.
or be a part of Ghibli.
Um, oh, who was it? Or like one of the Lord of the Rings. They were made two
I think it was
animations.
Rankin and Bass.
Radkin and Bass. So, like, I think personally, when I look at their stuff, like it's very unique, and sometimes I feel like it's way ahead of the time from anything else that was there. This is my personal opinion, though, but I think it was way ahead of time. And it's sad that they weren't able to produce more 2D animations, because I personally am so drawn to
Yeah,
the way they animate. It's so fascinating and unique to look at, and you can even see that in some art too, where you look at like Landeck was always brought up, but like the timelessness of his strokes and the way he renders things. It's so fascinating, and so the uniqueness might be later looked at like decades ahead. I'm like, oh, that's different. It was fascinating because people don't understand, but now it's like it
yeah.
kind of like paved the way for other things.
It's like that artist was ahead of his time.
Yeah, yeah,
So ahead that he had to die until it was picked up much later. So I know we're gonna wrap up soon, but I know some people had questions. So there was one I don't really have. I need to think this one thoroughly, which is like, how do you? What was it? It was something about like how do you promote something that's hard to critique so that people aren't disgusted or scared away from being too different or experimental.
Hmm.
I need to
Yeah.
think about that one because for me, like, I know that my stuff isn't too experimental, so I don't think I have, you know, that that fear. Um, but I guess at that point, it's kind of like also thinking about what's more important, being super experimental or trying to please a certain audience. Because if you
So,
wanted to like make sure people are engaging with your work, I think there has to be some form of quality that everyone can get into, right?
so I have an interesting point of view with that. So how do you promote? Okay, I'm just gonna read the question again. So how do you promote something that's hard to critique, so that people aren't disgusted or scared away from it being too different or experimental? And I think you simply just teach it, like break it down and showcase what you're doing and showcase the workflow. The people will understand how you arrived to that decision and might take parts of that workflow and create something like a almost like a Venn diagram of styles. And then it might be derivatives. Maybe the thing that you created might have been too different, but then the workflow that you showcased is so unique that it's elevated someone else. But then they'll always use your uniqueness. Like, I learned it from this area, and I was able to craft my own thing. So you're helping others with their voice.
Okay,
Might be
no,
a
that's a really
yeah.
good point of view. That I no, I'm gonna definitely change my point of view to that. Stealing it, but it's really good
That's,
because it's
yeah.
like, that's a point of view that is constructive and it builds for a better community too. Like you're helping others, or you're sharing a process, and I think that's super important too. Um,
Just as an example here, like I have all those processes in terms of like hybrid and stuff, and I've been like teaching you, and I'm always happy seeing you try and implement more Blender stuff into your own art, and you're like elevating that. Now there's a lot of people questioning how to do that. You're going to start making tutorials in terms of like hybridizing animations, and that's something we've talked about for like years. I'm like, man, I just want this to happen, so I make YouTube videos on it. You've been trying to adopt it a little bit more, and I've been teaching you. So I think that it's starting to happen now, and it's really cool for me to see that.
it's I yeah, it's like, I mean, that's also why it's also really important to have a healthy community too, so you can bounce off each other's ideas and build upon each other's stuff too. Like if you're collaborating.
Hmm. This is an interesting question here too. Like, would you recommend pursuing a passion on animation or keeping it as a hobby for someone in the mid 20s. And personally, for me, if it's a passion, I think age should be irrelevant in a sense, and just keep pursuing it.
Hmm.
It's unless you're seeking to enter the industry, that's then that can be taught in terms of portfolio because that's very standardized in terms of what they're looking for. But if you're trying to find a uniqueness in terms of animation, probably Tonica, you might have more to talk about that.
I'm trying to think because I have so many conflicting thoughts about that. And I also have a lot of thoughts and opinions that people will disagree with me about too. So I would say I'm pretty passionate about the work that I do, the animation work that I do. Um, Sometimes, but it's I have a very weird point of view where it's like I'm so passionate about it that there were times where I just had to quit my job because I love the thing too much that if I stayed at this one place, it will tarnish my view
Mm.
on my passion for that work. Um, so, I mean, it's weird because it's like if you're passionate, it's like you're gonna always find free time to do something, whether it is a hobby or not, or you're willing to spend free time to do it, which I do. I spend a lot of my free time just working on my own stuff. Um, but yeah,
Can see the conflict in your your emotions,
I'm
your
really
movement.
I'm super conflicted because it's like I've also known people who only went into animation just to work for a certain company, um, and build their career off of it. Some people went just to make money or to make a living. Um, but then my views on animation always change all the time. Like sometimes I'll be like, oh, I want to be career mainstream focused, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I need to love this medium more, so I'm gonna, be more independent. Um,
Mm.
so I'm very conflicted regarding my own passion for animation, and sometimes I tend to like not talk about animation all the time because I get sick of it sometimes.
And it makes sense because you're talking about like work constantly. That is, you've crafted a hobby that initially started as a hobby from a passion into a job. And it can scare at times because then you're going to start associating with projects that you've worked on that might not be the brightest in terms of your career, and that might have left you like, oh, I'm never going to work in animation again, kind of thing, to other projects like, what, I love animation, I'm going to keep doing this. And so there's a lot of conflict, and I really feel for you when you say you don't want to keep talking about animation because I guess that's the perception of how people see you as, Tonico, the animator. But like, oh, I have other interests and passions and other hobbies, but I'm only known for this one thing can be a little tiresome, correct?
Yeah, like again, like my part of my self growth is also knowing more about myself. I don't want to be just an animator or a person who just works on personal projects. I also want to be a better friend
Mm.
or a better leader, or I want to be good at a certain sport. These are other things, other goals that I have besides work. I guess we're getting a lot of questions. I guess the whole talk about personal projects is sort of done, and now we're just getting general questions. So I don't know how long we
Well, we've been
have.
over for a while,
Yeah,
man. I
we've been.
think it's
Well, we started late. We started late because of the tech issues. So I think we can wrap it up very soon, but we can answer some questions really quickly. Because I think I know some people left for other talks. So simple yes or no would be fine. But do you think that a career of animation is worth pursuing if you are a person who's willing to put in effort? Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's simple. My gut reaction says, yeah, I think it is.
yeah. I mean, trends when it comes to incorporating into no.
John C. asks, I have a passion for animation, but I am not yet good enough at drawing. What would be the best approach to move forward with this career? There's a lot of like good classes online that teach you technical drawing skills. Like CDA offers some really good ones. I think some Red How To stuff, CGMA. There's a lot of workshop style classes that all teach online now because of the pandemic, and you can learn like basic drawing skills for to build like good construction drawing, and also like study from existing material too. So I save model sheets of random cartoons that I enjoy, and I just keep them as reference, and I study from them, because the thing with like seeing model sheets or character design work from that and learning how to copy that style also helps you understand, you know, their language of problem solving and how you can utilize that in your own drawings.
Nico, I have a question for you.
What's up?
How do you deal with art blocks?
How do I deal with art blocks?
The dreaded creative block.
Ah, I did it. I did a journal on this because there's so much like feelings I have with art blocks. But when I have art blocks, either sometimes like a good thing is just to step away from it and do other things
100%.
because that's healthy. But if you, for some reason, you want to be productive, you just can't. You just feel so anxious that you need to work on something. I just spend that time just studying stuff, drawing. So I like to do live action studies where I copy a few frames from live action and turn that into animation because I learn a lot from that too. And I'm learning from it. I don't have to think about things. I just see what's on the screen, I analyze it, and I just draw it. That's it. But I think the healthy thing is just to I think I accidentally ended the stream.
Oh. Everyone's like, "So did it end?"
But they can hear us still, I guess. So because I closed the chat. So,
It's back. They're saying it's back. Can they still hear us?
I'm pretty sure they can hear us because I haven't really stopped the stream. Can you guys hear us?
No video. Accidentally closed the chat? You've silenced the voice of the people?
Yeah, I actually closed the chat. So, oh wow, holy crap! Now I'm getting like so many chats at once. So I think there was a weird thing with my internet.
You can bring up the stream.
Yeah, let me see what I can do here. Let me turn on my camera. So we're gonna wrap up soon. We're gonna wrap up soon, so I'm gonna quickly wrap things up. So
we're now a podcast. Here we go.
We're now at podcast mode. No
Hello
switching.
and welcome.
Sorry about this, guys. So let me just reorganize some stuff. There we go. Okay, so I think I think it's time to like wrap things up because we went way over time. We had technical difficulties like what just happened right now because I was apparently cutting in and out. But there you go. There's us. That's us in a nutshell. I mean, it's weird because it's like as soon as like I reconnected, all the chat started. So I think there was a weird lag in my internet. I think it just happened again. Cool. Anyways, let's wrap up. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. Sorry if there was a lot of awkwardness with the internet.
Yeah.
I'm freaking out. Like, I think my face is freaking out. Cool. Good chatting. Good chatting, Alan.
Likewise, Michael.
Yeah. Again, sorry for taking up all your time, guys, and I hope you guys have a good time with the rest of Lightbox. Okay, bye.
Have fun in Lightbox.
Bye.
See ya.
See